The Nightmare on Elm Street series, to me, is the finest in all of horror. It has quite possibly the most iconic villain in the horror genre in Freddy Krueger, as played by Robert Englund.
This is God.
Starting with the first film, written and directed by Wes Craven in 1984, this series would spawn 7 sequels and 1 remake. Each film would become event viewing for any horror fan, and would offer something new for audiences with every installment.
Welcome to prime time, bitch!
It goes without saying that such a franchise would ignite debate amongst fans about which film is the best. Well, I'm here to tell you that without a doubt, Wes Craven's New Nightmare is the absolute best in the series. Wes Craven's New Nightmare was released in 1994, 10 years after the debut of the first film. By then, the Nightmare films had grown to become just a little bit stale at that point. They had supposedly killed Freddy off for good in the previous film, in an effort to end the story and the series in a definitive way. However, you can never keep a good villain dead for long, and the fans demanded that he come back.
I thought you killed Freddy off.
Well, we did, but the fans, the fans, God bless them, they're clamoring for more. I guess evil never dies, right?
Since the prior film was not greatly received by fans and critics, the decision was made to bring Wes Craven back to write and direct a true definitive ending for the series. And boy, did he ever deliver. Prior to New Nightmare, Wes Craven had only been involved with the first and third films of the franchise, writing and directing the great first film, but only coming back for writing duties for the excellent third film, Dream Warriors. After the third film, Wes Craven would again go on to pursue other projects as new filmmakers such as Renny Harlin were given the opportunity to see what they could do with the franchise. During this time, the franchise would veer off into a more comedic tone than the more horrific one from what Wes Craven had initially started off with. It wouldn't be until Wes Craven came back with New Nightmare that Freddy would become scary again.
Don't miss me.
With Wes Craven writing and directing again, he would craft a story that would see Freddy becoming a dark force trying to escape the film world and coming into our own. The idea was that the Freddy character had become a host for a demonic entity while the films were being made and released. And after the character was killed off and the film stopped, that entity, having gotten used to being Freddy and liking it, would now make an attempt to cross over into the real world as a purer and more evil version of Freddy.
Darker. More evil?
Yeah.
With the change in tone becoming more horror-centric again, Wes would also change and update the look of Freddy to better represent the demonic entity that had taken the character over. This version of Freddy in Wes's story would have the claws coming out of Freddy's own hand, as opposed to just having him wear the iconic razored glove. Freddy would also be wearing a trench coat, as this image of Freddy was in Wes's original Nightmare that helped inspire the original Nightmare on Elm Street. Since this version of Freddy was meant to be more evil than before, he would also be given more demonic features on his face, with the skin looking more ripped than burnt, as if the demon was trying to force its way out, and also having more prominent shoulders. With Freddy coming into the real world, the film also features characters from the previous films coming back as the actors who played them. Heather Langenkamp gets to return, getting to play both herself and Nancy. Robert Englund gets to play his fun self along with the new evil Freddy. John Saxon returns as both himself and Nancy's father in a sizable role. We also get a few fun cameos of previous cast members at Heather's husband's funeral. Finally, along with producer Bob Shea making an appearance, we get the man himself, Wes Craven, playing himself throughout the film. Wes essentially plays the part of soothsayer and narrator, providing Heather with an explanation of what is happening, and with a warning about what is to come and what she must do. To defeat this new version of Freddy attacking her and her son in the real world, Heather is going to have to play Nancy one last time.
You're gonna have to make a choice.
Choice? What kind of choice?
Whether or not you're willing to play Nancy one last time.
The story that Wes Craven crafted here is one of the most engaging and inspired of the series. The meta storytelling style of real people knowing that they are becoming a part of a horror film would further be explored by Wes Craven in the Scream series. He would even blend the story with fairy tale elements such as Hansel and Gretel, shoving the mean old witch in the oven, and having Heather's son Dylan leaving breadcrumbs for her to find him. This story would lead to one of the most satisfying climaxes in the whole series, and the best ending out of any of the movies. With Freddy coming into the real world and attacking the people that Heather cares about, we even get to revisit one of the most iconic kills in the entire series, when Freddy kills babysitter Julie by dragging her up the hospital walls and slashing her to death.
Hey, Dylan. Ever played Skin the Cat?
We also get to revisit the moment of Nancy sinking into the steps from the first film. We even see the return of the original house on 1428 Elm Street when the movie world and the real world start to fully merge, and the actors become their movie characters once again. Heather even gets Nancy's gray hair streak during the last act of the film, along with her PJs. Speaking of, the last act of the film is the best in all of the films. With Heather fully becoming Nancy, she goes to Freddy's realm to face off with him just like in the first film. It's an intense and thrilling sequence that has you fully invested in Heather getting her child back and saving him from Freddy. Heather also gets to fully take charge here and completely owns her role.
Fuck you!
Crafting this final climactic scene just like a fairy tale has to be my favorite choice that this movie makes, and it gives this nightmare the best final shot in the whole series. If there's one criticism that I have from the previous Nightmare films, it has to be how most of them ended and concluded. The first film had a great final confrontation, but that last shot is a little cringy and confusing with the story. The second film had different rules than the others, and it wasn't really made clear how Freddy was ultimately defeated. The third film was great for most of it, but it had some questionable character deaths in the last act that never sat right with me. The fourth film had a pretty decent ending and protagonist for Freddy to face, but this was the movie where Freddy started becoming more funny than scary. The fifth film has some odd tonal shifts throughout it, with Freddy's final defeat being weirder than the rest. Most of the sixth film was pretty mediocre, with Freddy's supposed final demise not being nearly as flashy or satisfying as the others.
Kids.
This film, though, it offered a great and satisfying conclusion. That of a mother saving her child while defeating the evil monster by burning him in an oven and blowing him up. I can also understand why some people might not prefer this film over others. This film explores a new concept that the other films didn't, and that can make it a letdown for people expecting more of the same that they got before. Dream Warriors gets a lot of praise from fans as being the best, and I can see why. It has some of the best kills of the series, great set pieces and designs, Nancy and her dad coming back, and Freddy is still the menacing slasher that we are familiar with. My only problem with it, as I mentioned before, was some of the story choices that they made with a few of the characters at the end that didn't satisfy me as much as the story and the ending of New Nightmare. As any horror fan will tell you, killing off a character that you really want to live can leave you with a sour taste in your mouth. There's nothing sour about New Nightmare for me, though. Every decision and path the story takes is one that I can fully get behind. It doesn't have any of the budget constraints that the first film had, it makes Freddy scary again, and the deaths more meaningful. While it's true that it gets some criticism from straying from the familiar Nightmare formula like Freddy's Revenge did, it does it in a way that makes sense, and it gives the series a satisfying conclusion. Freddy wouldn't return again until the special one-off of Freddy vs. Jason that was made in 2003. And it was strictly made for fans of both horror icons as a, thank you. If I had to pick the best thing about New Nightmare, It's that it provides a proper and satisfying ending to a horror series, which can be rare in the genre. Many series can fade into direct-to-video obscurity with one bad cheap sequel after the next. However, the Nightmare on Elm Street films always made for appointment viewing at the box office, and you couldn't have asked for a better way to end the series. It ensures that Freddy Krueger will always have a great legacy as one of the premier villains in horror, and it will always leave us begging for more. With New Nightmare, Freddy got to go out on top, and he will have us always go on loving him.